From the permafrost of Siberia to the high peaks of the Andes, the Earth has held on to deep secrets for longer than our species has existed. Creatures and humans preserved so perfectly in ice, the first people who found them thought they had died last week. Today we uncover the most astonishing frozen discoveries ever pulled from the ice. From extinct predators to sacrificed miners, each one stranger than the last. Each one shifting the story we thought was settled. And with every discovery, one question becomes harder to ignore. How much of our past is still locked beneath the ice?
The saber-toothed cub.
For 37,000 years, no one had seen anything like this. Not even its whisker or a paw. Every image of a saber-toothed cub that ever existed was built from shattered bones and guesswork.
The saber-toothed tiger is one of the most iconic extinct animals. This is a machete-mouthed demon.
Scientists were simply working in the dark during the reconstruction processes. They were reverse engineering a ghost. But all that was about to change in the autumn of 2020. This is after a man searching for mammoth tusks along the Pazyryk River in Siberia pointed a water cannon at a frozen mud wall. And the ghost stepped out. Right there was a 3-week-old cub, no heavier than a house cat, its eyes still closed, its brown fur and whiskers perfectly preserved. Its square paw pads, a feature no modern cat possesses, were untouched by time. It had died before it had ever hunted. Even before it had ever opened its eyes to look at the world that was about to forget it for 37,000 years. Scientists identified it as Homotherium latidens, the last line of saber-toothed cats on Earth. The front half of its body was remarkably complete, but the back half was missing. We still do not know the cause of that separation. When comparative analysis against a 3-week-old modern lion cub was performed, the results were shocking. There were structural differences that no paleontologist had been able to confirm before. It had no carpal pads on the wrists, possibly an adaptation for silent movement across snow. Finding it in Siberia also rewrote the species' distribution map. Homotherium was previously mapped only across the Americas, Africa, and Europe. Now it was in Asia, too. DNA extraction is already underway. However, researchers studying the specimen have pointed to something unusual. The cub's relatively recent extinction and its close genetic relationship to modern big cats make it one of the more plausible candidates for gene editing revival. But for now, that remains theoretical. However, the cub is real. And so is the possibility, however distant, of bringing a species like it back to life. The Lena horsefoal. There is a crater in eastern Siberia so large it has been swallowing the forest above it for decades. The locals call it the gateway to the underworld. The permafrost walls drop nearly 180 feet straight down. And every year the thaw pulls more of them apart, exposing what the frozen ground has been holding underneath. In 2018, what it gave up was a foal, 2 weeks old, hooves still soft from birth, every hair on its body intact, the coat still the color it was the day it died, 42,000 years ago. Scientists who examined it described the preservation in simple language. They said it looked peaceful, like it had simply lain down, but there was something more shocking. When they cut into the tissue, liquid blood ran out. This was the oldest liquid blood ever recorded, 42,000 years old. It was preserved so completely by the cold that the cellular structure had barely degraded. To add on to that, traces of urine were still present in the bladder. The Lena horse was a stocky, cold-adapted breed, shorter-legged and heavier-coated than any horse alive today. It might be extinct. But scientists at the Northeastern Federal University in Russia are now working to change that. They are extracting DNA from the muscle and organ tissue in an attempt to produce a viable embryo for implantation into a modern mare. They have been trying for months. But they are yet to have a breakthrough. Something is certain, though. Somewhere in that preserved cellular material is a genetic blueprint for an animal that last breathed during the Ice Age.
We almost never find mummified animals like this with skin and flesh.
Zhour the wolf pup. Somewhere in the Yukon, 57,000 years ago, a wolf pup died. She was 6 weeks old and small enough to hold in one hand, and the frozen ground took her so fast and held her so completely that when she came out of a permafrost wall in 2016, tumbling loose from a blast of water from a gold miner's cannon, she still had her eyelashes. The Triandekwechen people on whose land she was found named her Zhour, wolf in the Han language. Paleontologist Julie Meechan, one of the world's foremost experts in Ice Age carnivores, examined her. She described her as the most complete wolf mummy ever found. 100% intact, the only thing missing were the eyes. 57,000 years ago, the people who lived in this same valley hunted mammoths. They would light fires at night, and small younger wolves exactly like Zhour circled those fires in the dark. They were often drawn by the smell of meat and warmth, close enough to see, but not yet close enough to trust. She was part of that world, right at the edge of the firelight. When the DNA results came back, the story changed entirely. Zhour is not related to any wolf alive today. Her entire lineage is gone. A ghost population, extinct without descendants. It's only known to exist because one pup drowned in the right mud at the right temperature 57,000 years ago. Without her, we would never have known they were there at all. One specimen, one genome. That's the only proof we have that an entire population ever existed. The steppe bison. Before the American bison, before the European wisent. Even before any bovine that walks the earth today, there was something larger, wilder, and built for a world that no longer exists. It roamed the mammoth steppe in herds that darkened the horizon. It fed the lions, the wolves, the cave bears, and the people who painted its portrait on cave walls in colors that have lasted 30,000 years. Then it was gone. But in 2022, it made a grand return. In the Yana Indigirka lowland of Siberia, researchers completed a necropsy on a steppe bison that had been frozen for 8,000 years. Surprisingly, the heart was there, the brain was there. The blood vessels had survived too, not as fossils or impressions, but as real physical structures. Even the digestive system was present, and the wool was still attached to the skin. When scientists extracted material from the body, what they found defied all expectations. Its chromosomes were still viable 8,000 years later. The steppe bison is not a distant evolutionary relative of modern bovids. It is their direct ancestor. Scientists who have spent careers working on bovine reproduction already understand the biology of these animals at a cellular level. The infrastructure for revival already exists in a way it does not, either for mammoths or cave lions. The lack of fat around the abdomen told researchers something else. This animal died of starvation. It was thin and weakened. It had survived long enough to feel the world changing around it. The climate shifting, the steppe shrinking, before the cold took it and preserved it till 2022. Now, science holds the answer on whether the revival of the steppe bison is a possibility. The Siberian ice maiden. At the roof of the world, 4 countries meet: Russia, Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia. The place is so remote, so breathtakingly silent, that locals call it the second layer of heaven. And beneath its frozen ground, the Earth has been keeping secrets the rest of the world abandoned long ago. In the summer of 1993, archaeologist Natalia Polosmak was melting permafrost with buckets of boiling water when she spotted something: a shoulder, a blue tattoo, and underneath it, a face. This was the Siberian ice maiden, also called the Princess of Ukok. She was 25 years old. She had been in the ground for 2,500 years. She was dressed in silk, wrapped in wool, and laid in a coffin carved from a single larch tree. Her headdress stood 90 centimeters tall. 6 horses in full ceremonial harness had been sacrificed and arranged beside her. Whoever buried her wanted whoever found her to understand that she had mattered enormously. Her tattoos were extraordinary. They depicted a mythical creature with a griffin's beak, a deer's body, and antlers flowering at the tips. They were rendered with a precision that modern tattoo artists have observed with open admiration. Infrared imaging has since revealed additional tattoos invisible to the naked eye. But when the MRI scans came back, the entire picture shifted. She had advanced breast cancer. She had carried it for approximately 3 years before she died. She was likely in too much pain to walk to her own burial site. It is likely that she was carried there. Cannabis residue in her burial kit suggests she was managing that pain with whatever the steppe offered her. There is a belief among some researchers that she was a shaman, that her suffering and her navigation of it was inseparable from her role. She fought her own body for 3 years. Then the cold held her for 2,500 more. The woolly rhinoceros. Picture a rhinoceros. Now give it a coat thick enough to survive a Siberian winter. Make it 6 feet at the shoulder, 15 feet long, and put a dense horn on its face. The horn was so heavy it dragged toward the ground like a blade built for sweeping snow aside to reach the frozen grass beneath. That's not CGI, it was a real animal. It walked from Spain to China. It also shared the mammoth steppe with woolly mammoths, cave lions, and the first humans to venture into the far north. And for most of history, all we had of it were fragments. Scattered bones, a skull here and a horn there. Then in 2007, the Kolyma River in Russia blessed mankind with one. Found 20 feet deep in the riverbank, the Kolyma rhino is the only complete permafrost-preserved adult woolly rhinoceros known to science. She was a female, intact enough that researchers could determine her diet from stomach contents. They determined she fed on low-growing steppe vegetation cropped close to the frozen ground. She had lived hard in a hard landscape, and the cold had kept every detail of that life inside her. 8 years later, the permafrost released something else, a calf, 10,000 years old. It was almost 5 feet long, its thick hair still attached, and 2 fist-sized horns fixed to its skull. Scientists believe woolly rhinoceros calves died in enormous numbers, as the infant mortality rate was likely severe. This could also be the reason why juvenile remains are almost unheard of. Yet this one was perfectly preserved, giving mankind a rare chance to piece the puzzle together. The woolly rhinoceros's closest living relative is not the white rhino or the black rhino, it is the Sumatran rhino, another critically endangered species. There are fewer than 80 of them left on Earth. The ancestor is frozen in Siberia. The descendant is almost gone. And that particular thread is running very thin. The children of Llullaillaco. At 22,000 feet above sea level, the air is half gone. Nothing grows, and only a few things move here. The cold is a permanent condition, absolute and indifferent. The Inca civilization believed the high peaks were not empty. They were inhabited by gods. And these gods who lived there demanded the most perfect offering a civilization could produce. And what better offering than a child? On the 16th of March, 1999, archaeologist Johann Reinhard reached the summit of the volcano Llullaillaco on the Chile-Argentina border and found 3 of them: the maiden, 13 years old, the boy, 4 or 5, and the lightning girl, also 4 or 5. They were placed in an underground chamber 500 years ago and left to the cold. Forensic expert Andrew Wilson called the maiden the best preserved mummy he had ever encountered anywhere in the world. She had long braids, unbroken skin, and her fingers were folded in her lap. In Wilson's words, she looked as if she had simply fallen asleep. The lightning girl earned her name from a post-mortem strike that burned her face and shoulder. The boy was found bound, his death apparently less peaceful. The maiden's eyes were closed. Her hair told the rest of the story. Hair grows at roughly 1 centimeter per month and records everything the body experiences as it does. Analysis of her braids mapped her final 21 months precisely. For most of that time, she survived on simple foods such as potatoes and vegetables. But something changed exactly 1 year before her death. She switched to elite foods such as maize and dried llama. Needless to say, this was ceremonial fare. It is at this time that coca leaf consumption also climbed steadily with each passing week. It spiked in the final days to levels that would have left her calm, sedated, and compliant. She was carried to the summit, left to the gods, and then claimed by the cold. However, something still remains unknown, and might remain like that forever. Did the maiden know in her final year that she had been chosen and that she was being prepared? If yes, was she afraid? The cave lion cubs. For 30,000 years, people painted them on cave walls. In the deep dark of Chauvet, in southern France, prehistoric artists pressed pigment into stone and drew them with a precision that suggests something beyond memory. A long body, a heavy head, and no mane. They often painted an animal that shared their world, that hunted at the edges of their camps. One that they feared and watched and apparently could not stop thinking about. Then the cave lion vanished, and all that was left were the paintings. But just when the world seemed to have moved on, a man in Siberia's Yakutia Republic found something in the permafrost in 2017. This was a creature that no living human had ever seen, a cub, 1 to 2 months old.
Scientists in Russia are learning more about the animals that once roamed the Earth. The Ice Age may have ended thousands of years ago, but many of its secrets are just now coming to the surface.
Its fur intact, skin still perfect, organs also holding up. Its teeth were just coming in. She had never hunted or even roared. The world outside the den was something she had barely glimpsed before a mudslide took her and the cold sealed her in place for 28,000 years. She was given the name Sparta. Stockholm University evolutionary geneticist Love Dalen described her as likely the finest example of Ice Age preservation ever discovered. A year later, 15 meters away, another cub appeared. He was named Boris. He was older by 15,000 years, making him 43,000 years old. He was preserved with the same impossible completeness. Now, there were 2 cubs, 15 meters and 15,000 years apart, emerging from the same frozen wall within 12 months of each other. The cave paintings in Chauvet showed no mane on the males, and for decades paleontologists had assumed it was an artistic expression. But Sparta and Boris confirmed the artists were right. 30,000 years later, the ice gave us the proof. The Pazyryk tattooed chieftain. While Athens was building the Parthenon and the Persian Empire stretched from Egypt to the edge of India, a group of people nobody wrote about were moving across the Altai Mountains on horseback. They carried silk traded from China and textiles dyed in colors sourced from Persia. And at their funerals, cannabis burned in bronze censers over their dead. These people left no cities, no written language, and no stone monuments. But, in its usual style, the frozen ground decided to keep everything about these people intact. In 2007, archaeologist Vyacheslav Molodin excavated a male chieftain from the Ukok permafrost. Molodin was married to Natalia Polosmak, who had found the Ice Maiden on the same plateau 14 years earlier. The chieftain had 2 long braids reaching his waist. He was buried with weapons and horses, and he also had a tattoo of an elk covering his arms and torso. The elk had hooves curling into spirals, and his body still felt alive with coiling Pazyryk lines, everything done with surgical precision. He had been in the ground for 2,500 years. Yet, he looked like someone had buried him last season. The Pazyryk are not a mystery civilization. They are a hidden one. Hidden, not by time, but by the accident of preservation. The burials that survived did so because water seeped into the wooden burial chambers and froze, sealing silk, food, medicine, and art inside. The world's oldest surviving pile carpet came out of a Pazyryk mound. It is in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. It's knotted at 360,000 knots per square meter. Infrared imaging is now revealing tattoos on known specimens that were invisible to the naked eye for decades. Now, it's almost certain that more burials remain beneath the plateau, frozen, undisturbed, and still keeping their secrets in the dark. The ice keeps everything. Every creature on this list spent thousands of years frozen in place. And then the world warmed, or a tusk hunter's cannon blasted through a mud wall. And suddenly a puzzle in archaeology was solved. What we cannot ignore now is that the permafrost is melting faster than at any point in recorded human history. And that means more such discoveries are coming. More animals, more people, more things we don't have a category for yet. The question is not whether we will find a Neanderthal in the permafrost someday. Scientists say that's not a far-out idea. It's theoretically possible. The question is what we do when that happens, because there is currently no protocol, no international agreement, and no legal framework for a perfectly preserved specimen of an extinct human species emerging from the Siberian ice. The ice held these things in trust for us. It's giving them back now, faster and faster, whether we are ready or not.